So take a minute. We're doing a Pathwork lecture on the life force, which I find is very beautiful because it's, very much a present and sensory experience that we can tune into. And so just take a minute, close your eyes, settle back in your seat, and sort of notice, like, it could be, even not so full of life, but how's your life force right now, and whatever it is fine, it's like not to judge it, but just to be aware, like, okay, right in this moment, and it actually changes and fluctuates moment to moment, in some ways. So here we are in this moment now, being with this experience of the life force within us. And as you're, sitting with that and feeling it, for me, it often kind of calls me deeper or to some other location in my body. I just kind of listen and follow the life force inside of my body and in my awareness, being present to what it's revealing, what I'm noticing as I'm being with it wherever it's calling me in my body. And I like to sort of also use my breath, right, to enliven or to give life, like the breath is the prana, is the, a part of what energizes. And so if we just breathe in, and again, not like trying to be really intense about it, but just welcoming in our breath, in our hearts, the breath, and sort of receiving it. And then just noticing how fully, how easily it can be received. Notice if it stays the same, or even as you're just noticing it, is there movement, change? And just see if you can take a final moment now and just, like, bless this gift of life within you. And let it bless you back. And then as you're ready, just take a couple of breaths and wiggle your toes or whatever helps to bring you sort of back. So I'm going to share screen in a minute, but does anybody want to say anything about, share anything about how that meditation was? What you noticed about it?
Well, I really needed that, so thank you. Just like you mentioned, the ease of it. Once I was open to it and allowed it, it really did nourish me. So
Yeah, great.
I forget how easy it can be sometimes just to do that.
Great. You got anything, Frank?
That was nice. I'm a little bit calmer spaced than I was at the last body scan that we
Right.
did.
Okay. So you were able to do it a little.
Last Tuesday. Yeah, I'm in a better place tonight.
So I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. Let's see. It is. So welcome to this reading and discussion of Pathwork lecture number 48. It was channeled originally by Eva Paracas, March 13th, 1959. And the title is The Life Force in the Universe. Greetings, Sagan.
Before we go on, I was just thinking, 1959. I just have to wonder what people thought about it back in 1959. I don't think too much of this was going on back then.
Right. No, that's a good point, Frank. There, like when these lectures were originally delivered, it's like the consciousness and awareness of the most of the people, was completely on a materialistic and, or a kind of traditional, religious plane. And so, there was, I'm sure, some people, and certainly those drawn to Eva must have had some, some sense of this, right? But yeah, and it's interesting now because it's kind of like just, at least within our circle of, kind of new age and people that are seekers and, interested in all of this stuff. It's like everything the guide shared is, in 1,000 different places showing up, and so I know a lot of what they're talking about lately is this embodied awakening, right? And so, like, I think the life force and the energy and the body are kind of really interconnected, and I definitely like to work at that level of, just being present. So to continue with the lecture. So greetings in the name of the Lord. I bring you blessings, my dear friends. Tonight, I will discuss the life force in the universe. The universal life force is contained in every sphere or world. All inanimate objects, abstract ideas, and living human beings, I would say all living beings, nothing can exist without it. I will not discuss its manifestation in other realms and high spheres outside your reach and understanding. There would be no point in that since you could not grasp it, my friends. In my discussion, I will use terms that you can apply to everyday life. An inanimate object is petrified life force. A beautiful idea, a truth, is flowing life force. Life force is eternal, and therefore all life is eternal. Death is but an illusion. An inanimate object you call dead is only so temporarily. All life, in whatever way it manifests, must exist eternally, for non-eternal life is no life, and therefore a meaningless contradiction. The life force contains all divine attributes. It is. It has not come into existence. It does not do. It does not work or have. It simply is. Try to understand the significance and distinction of these words. Life force is all around you and within you. So there's a lot of really interesting ideas he's thrown out in there. And there's a puzzle that I haven't quite penetrated. I mean, I get, when he's saying that you can't, it's a contradiction to have non-eternal life. And yet, I don't know that my mind has completely wrapped my head around, that, but I certainly feel like this, kind of life force, what I would call in a way the Holy Spirit, from a Christian context, maybe, that animates everything, and maybe even in a physics level, you might call it the quantum field or something. I don't know. We're dealing with a lot of different interesting fields and things that are happening at that level. So I don't know if they're equivalent or not, but I think we can kind of begin to imagine, and the guide always says that, in order to really, manifest or, understand something, we have to first be able to visualize it, to imagine it, to conceive of the possibility of it. So, as he offers these kind of little tidbits of truth from that perspective, which is maybe not as familiar to us here, we can try it on for size, and we can work and explore it in our minds. So, does anybody want to comment on any of that at this point? So a human being living in complete and utter harmony with the life force would not die, yet would not remain in the physical body either. For your matter is petrified life force and exists only where the field of the life force is disturbed in some way. As you have heard from various sources of teaching, death is not necessary in principle, and one day death will be eliminated. Fully self-realized people will gradually transform their bodies to a spiritual form. This is so, although its realization lies in a very distant future measured by Earth time. But in principle, it certainly is possible. Wherever the life force has not been violated, happiness, that is complete harmony and peace, can be yours without the trepidations and fear of losing it again that accompany the temporary happiness for you human beings. All you know from the teachings you have so far received, you all know from the teachings you have so far received, that you violate spiritual law constantly within your soul, if not in deed, word, or thought, at least in your unconscious emotions. Whenever such violation happens, you twist the life force that could flow through you. You prevent the life force from reviving you. What I'm showing you on this path of self-finding is a gradual, slow way, and there is no faster way, to dissolve all the walls, rocks, and petrifications within yourself, and so allow the life force to work in you. Whoever has experienced even a slight victory has overcome a resistance, found a truth, or made a recognition, even an unpleasant one. Or rather, exactly these, has experienced a feeling of peace, strength, and a sense of being vibrantly alive until the next obstruction is tackled. So does that make sense? Right? Like the gradual process, and then when we have a victory of overcoming some resistance and recognizing a truth, it's like even when it's like one that's difficult to face, we really do have a recognition of the alignment, and when we're in other states, we begin to subtly feel how we are twisting the life force. So it's a part of, like, if you are, working in your body, feeling the life force, you can, kind of recognize that in, your moment ongoing, kind of process. And then we can also notice, like, how we do it with our thinking, the distortions, like he says, where we're violating spiritual law. So we can explore it from that standpoint as well. But I really do like to just explore it from this, living sensory place, and feel like, oh, how I'm blocking the life force in some part of my body, and just stay with it and be present to it, and kind of seek to understand or see, where it might relax, where I might be able to convince it to try to let go for a minute just to see what would happen, right? And usually with my, invitation and presence and reassurance, like I can clear. And I think that there's a way that we, kind of things come in and get stuck in us. And so it's almost like spiritual hygiene to continue to tune in and notice where we're clenched again, some thought form, some trauma, some old reaction, and we contracted. and blocked the flow of the life force or twisted it inside of us in some way. And so we can, just be there and notice and with our consciousness allow it to flow again. And usually like a river, when it's given life force and flow, it's given the energy to flow, it kind of can right itself, and carry whatever was there to the sea for more healing and cleansing. So we can be in a lot more peace in between things than we are now, I think, is part of what he's saying, right? And we can learn how to rest in this flow and then let it work through us as it's when we are feeling stuck, and we will spend less time being stuck and more time in the flow, right? So these rare moments should be a living proof to you that what I say is not just a beautiful story or a remote and abstract theory without any bearing on the now. It is utter reality accessible to you anytime if you choose to turn inward. The obstructions within your soul can exist only because you have violated divine law in some way. When divine law is violated, the life force cannot work. Note the word law has very often a wrong connotation for you. Most human beings, when they hear this word, react to it emotionally in a way that has nothing to do with the sense in which I mean it. Law means to you, often unconsciously, something you are forced or compelled to obey, an authority that is stronger than you. I outlined this in a whole lecture recently. This kind of emotional association with the concept of law is completely opposed to its true meaning. Law, in its real and divine sense, has nothing to do with force or compulsion. Quite the contrary. As soon as force or compulsion set in, whether from outside or from within your own self, at that moment, divine law is violated. For divine law is inner freedom. And so whenever we are constricting ourselves, contracting against the flow, right, it's like we ourselves are blocking that inner freedom. And so it's, I think, in a way, a part of this work that we're exploring and learning how we're doing that so we can unblock it, right? Remember how to let it go and not try to use force or compulsion with our own self in any way, or with others, or with life. Right? So you can gain inner freedom only by liberating yourself from errors. As the first and inevitable step, you have to bring them to consciousness. Only after that can you free yourself from them. So instead of talking about violating divine law, it might be better to say that divine truth is violated. For truth is life force, and truth is certainly divine law. You all know, my dear friends, that the path on which I lead you shows the truth about yourself. And, I think this is multi-leveled, the truth of our ultimate real nature, our true divine nature, our true life force, eternal self, and also the truth about, our little ego and our defenses and our, ways that we are twisting the life force so that it can't flow freely with us. Life force is regeneration. Petrified life force means degeneration. In your images, your wrong conclusions, your conscious and unconscious ignorance and errors, you do not live in truth, and therefore you prohibit the life force which, though it has many other attributes, is always a healing force for your body, your mind, your soul, and for your spirit. Thus, you will readily believe that all physical illness is only a chain reaction, a final outer manifestation of obstructed life force. So, and I think, this is more familiar to most people with, the healing work of Barbara Brennan and many other healing modalities that, kind of work with this understanding, as well as the pathwork, that are the distortion of the life force can often start at a physical, at emotional or spiritual or mental levels, right? So he says an image, which is an unconscious generalization and a conclusion about life, but it's a projection onto life from a historical situation. And it's not necessarily true in the moment, it could be, but we're still seeing through the lens. And so we can't really even determine what's real out there, right? And so where we're, in an image, right, where that can, have a defense to protect us, which means we have to constrict the muscles in our body to block the flow of the feeling that's connected with it, or to force ourselves to hold up or do a certain thing. And when we do that constriction and blocking, it's literally we're closing off certain cells in our bodies, certain, organs and, areas of our body from receiving the flow of the life force. And so then physical illness can result from that. And usually where we have a physical difficulty, even through old age, it's like we're just, we're rigor mortis is setting in, we're contracting more and more into our old defense pattern in some sense as we age. And so, it's like as we clear through life, what we've cleared, we're free of, but, we're still always working. And so, I just went to the chiropractor today, my body was all out of whack, and there's a way that it's part of the energetic twisting that I'm doing because I've been under a lot of stress lately, right? And so, working all of that, it's like I don't know if I could have gotten it flowing again. So it's good to go get body work. It's good to see a chiropractor if you can, that kind of thing, right? And maybe also, some kind of healing work if you like that sort of thing. So whenever you have obstructions within your soul, the only way to cure the malady is first to prepare for the proper reception of the life force. The first step is to encounter the untruth. And that, of course, is not pleasant. This leads many people to believe that your path cannot be the right one, that our path cannot be the right one. They think that because the divine is beautiful, harmonious, and blissful, to experience the opposite is an indication that something contrary to the divine is taking place. What a misunderstanding, my friends. How can you believe that you can simply bypass all the disharmony you yourself have planted in your soul and then directly experience divine harmony? You have to understand the wrong causes you have set in motion before you can truly understand divine truth. If you have planted a poisonous plant in your garden, spoiling all the good plants, can you get rid of the bad plant without getting hold of it and pulling it out? This work is not exactly pleasant, for the poison may even affect you temporarily while touching it. But this cannot be avoided. It is better than to leave the poisonous plant in your garden. Pain has to be endured one way or another before you can get rid of that in you, which causes and has constantly caused pain. You must learn to distinguish between two basic kinds of pain, my friends: the degenerating and the regenerating. You have that in the physical realm as well. There is the kind of pain of becoming sick, feeling the symptoms of an onsetting illness. One is then on the downward curve, and then there is a different kind of pain, often even more acute, which goes with the healing process, the regenerating pain. This is often, indeed, always necessary before complete cure or healing can take place. Such pain is on the upward curve. Before undergoing an operation, for instance, first you feel the kind of pain of becoming sick, often long before you know what is wrong. And then your physician finds out and he operates on you. In the healing process, you endure a completely different kind of pain. You all know the wound cannot heal before the pus has been let out. And again, the cleansed state, the tissues can grow together again. That is the regenerating pain. The same holds true for the soul. You cannot escape this reality, my friends. You have the choice either of remaining on the downward curve in the state where you suffer from symptoms, refusing to go to the root of the evil, or of mustering up courage and approaching the problem, cutting open the wound, and allowing the healing forces of nature to take over. After letting out the pus, your errors, wrong conclusions, etc., you need to endure for a while the kind of pain that is regenerating. The operation itself would be the unpleasantness of facing what is wrong with you. It is the high point, or shall we say the low point, before the upward curve can begin. And there's an interesting thing for me in this, because it's like, here's where, the ego and the higher self hear this at kind of different levels. So, my ego with my idealized self-image, kind of latches onto what is wrong with me and kind of goes into fear, or goes into judgment of itself, and is afraid of being exposed maybe, or something like that. And yet, in my higher self, here's that it's kind of like, oh, I'm going like into my body to feel where my constriction is happening, right? And then I want to sit with that, and I want to speak with that. I want to understand that. I want to ask it, like, hi, how are you? What are you doing? Why are you holding me like that? Like, who are you? And oftentimes when I'm, questioning in some way, right? And it can happen in different forms, but, the seeking is there. And then somehow that element, that aspect, will reveal itself, will show me more, will, maybe it's usually initially the defense, initially just the block. And so if I can kind of support myself to relax that block, I might feel what's underneath it. Right. And then feeling what's underneath it, I might have a flash of a recollection of a memory, because it was probably just an emotional feeling that comes, some sadness or something, but all of a sudden the flow of that sadness, and, oh, I'm remembering this event, right? And so, it's like the movement of the obstruction has gone, and now the movement of the energy is happening, but it has to bring us there. Now, we don't need to go back into the trauma of the event. We don't need to go back into the story and tell ourselves how terrible it was. It's like, or relive it in some way, but we do need to feel the energy flowing and bringing, through consciousness and through our body, whatever comes with that movement that is now opened up of the life force inside of us. And as we learn to make a space inside of us to allow that to happen, and we learn to just be there witnessing it and holding that, it all becomes, there's no suffering in that. Sometimes there's a little discomfort, but there's no suffering. Right. And the suffering comes from our, rejection or our contraction against the pain, the contraction against the contraction. And so as we begin to try to relax, open, let flow happen, right? We may have to feel something. Maybe, we've been kind of trying to hold it and numb it out, so, if flow and movement begins, maybe initially there's some sharper physical pain, that we have to kind of breathe, almost like we're giving birth. And of course we have to discern, is this degenerating pain? Are you hurting yourself? If you are, like, stop doing what you're doing. But, most of the time there's a way we begin to sense in the body where it's just, the movement, and it feels painful, but good in some way. So any questions, any comments so far? We've covered a lot of territory here. How's this sounding? Are you able to follow it? Making sense?
Yes. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he's going to tie in pride, self-will, and fear as life force blockers. That's what's coming up
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
in my mind. I mean, I would think that really fear would be like the biggest life force blocker.
Exactly. And yeah, and fear is kind of like, I mean, you know, if we have pride, then we're afraid of humiliation, or we're afraid of you know, something. So if we have self-will, we're afraid of not getting our way. So kind of in some ways it all boils down to fear at some level, you know, but um
I mean, you know, I'm just sitting here trying to think in terms of my own personal experience, where have I actually felt this life force? You know, how has it manifested in my life at any given moment for whatever split seconds that it may have occurred? You know,
you
uh,
know, so I think you're making it too woo-wah, Frank. It's right here, right now.
think
You
so.
know, yeah, it's like it's not some big fancy thing, you know, like this is part of the some of the confusion that, you know, but it's like the life force is, you can feel it with yourself right now. It may not be the full force of the life force if it were flowing through you and, you know, in your expanded state, right?
Mhm.
It's trickling through like somebody, you know's got a hose that's got a bunch of debris, so we turn the water pressure down so we don't end up feeling the pressure, right? So we just let it trickle. Or you can go in and you can notice, you know, like for instance, even now, you know, do you feel, again, it's this sensory realm. So this is part of the difficulty, is people are so intellectual and so mental that they are not feeling the life force, which is a sensory physical thing, right?
Mhm.
But you can feel it right now in you. It is what is animating you right this moment. It is what takes your breath when if you decide you're not going to breathe, you know, it's like it's it's the energy that allows you to vibrate, you know, and that feeds all of your cells with your blood flow and your heart pumping and all of that. So it's on this physical level, but it's also an energetic, like, you know, the flow of the meridians and the chakra system and all of that is also life force, but it's like less dense. So the life force kind of has layers of density. And so at very high frequencies, you know, we can't notice it so much because we, you know, and again, as we purify, we tune into it more and more in higher frequencies. But, you know, it's always with us in the body. And sometimes, you know, it feels a little tired and weary, right?
Mhm.
And so that's your life force, right? Is that sense of, you know, we, I mean, we've put a few years in on this planet. We no shame there, you know, it's like, and maybe if we were, you know, divine beings, we would be carrying quite so much, and so we wouldn't be so tired and weary. But there's, again, you know, we're here doing our work, we're loved by God. You can maybe even feel in the life force also, you know, this feeling of love for you, right? This willingness to animate you, this being with you of something that's, you know, yours, but it's also bigger than you. It's also more than you.
Mhm.
And so it can touch us, and it can, you know, uh, kind of calm us even, or it can energize us. Like if we wanted to, you know, like a lot of core that you've done, you know, where we get up and, you know, energize the body, right? You know, that creates the pump in the body that starts the life force from, you know, to get moving. And then that creates some expansion. And then that's when we can do our work. So it's all that. So I think you have felt it more often than you imagine.
Probably so. Like you said, I'm trying to aggrandize it, I guess, or something like that, you know?
It is. It's also, you know, God. It's also the Holy Spirit, but it's everywhere and in us now. And if we can't connect to it, even in these very, like with us now, we're probably never going to find it, because that's where you have to discover it, is here within you now. And then, when we get fully present in ways, sometimes then the expansion happens and it carries us into larger realizations of it. But it's only in the now. It's always, And so by just staying with however the life force is, instead of, like, oh, I'm tired, like I should buck up, or I want to just collapse and something's wrong with me, so we're judging ourselves, and that makes us feel even more depleted of life force, because self-judgment does that. Right.
Yeah, always judging our behavior. Sometimes I even judge my animation. When I'm
Yeah,
excited about something, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be so excited.
exactly.
People
There you
will
go.
people will read me wrong and think I'm, crazy old man.
Exactly. So, that's what twists the life force in us, right? And blocks it from having its full expression and flow. And so, we're just trying to become more conscious of it, because again, the learning curve, the re-education is not, again, through the mental body saying you should be different. It's through the living out of this, and discovering another way that our body can respond, and our thoughts can let our body be, right, and we can support, instead of constricting, we can support the flowing through of the energy in the body, and feeling the love, feeling this is, the thing that we're judging ourselves, and so then we assume God's judging us too, because that voice of judgment in us becomes the projected God. And then we feel unworthy, and then we don't feel love, and that's part of the life force, and that needs to flow through us too. So by visualizing this, it may be easier for you to work your way out of the trap you now find yourself in. You do not need to endure blackness and despair. Turn around, my dear ones, and try to understand what I say here, and approach the real affliction, instead of continuously paying attention to the symptoms only. Even my friends furthest advanced on the path are tempted to look at the symptoms of evil rather than the cause, because of their unconscious fear of the sharper pain of the operation. I understand that once you have the courage to go through the operation, the time of pain is very short. And especially if we aren't beating on ourselves, If, however, you stay on the downward curve, attaching yourself to the symptoms, but turning away from their origin within yourself, the suffering will last. The pain will endure as long as you do not decide to face the real problem and decide for the operation. This advice does not only apply to taking this path as a whole, but should be applied to every step on it. You may be on the path all right and still deliberately overlook certain sick points in your soul, seeking the remedy from the outer world. This again is attachment to the symptoms. And, this is tricky, it's like, it's very tempting for us always to seek the cause and the remedy from outside of ourselves. And so to me, this is kind of like the main spiritual discipline of the pathwork, is this part of the self-responsibility that says what we are experiencing is in some way or another our self-creation. And that doesn't mean that other people aren't involved or the things didn't happen, but that our point of power, our point of, dealing with it in a way that's less suffering, is, to be looking for our part in it, looking for, like what is inside of us that is calling this, getting pleasure out of that, believing that that's the only way it is, all of those things will manifest it, right? The more you dissolve the inner obstructions, the petrifications, by facing your misconceptions, misunderstandings, and the untruth that lives in your soul, the more you allow the life force to flow through you. The more you do that, the sooner you will revive on all levels of your being. So just even imagine right this moment, can you like just for a second, open yourself to this, reviving flow of the life force through you. Just take a breath or two and just welcome it, invite it in. If you feel it, fine. If you don't feel it, fine. Trust it's still there. It's waiting in the wings. It's ready to come on your invitation. And, it's helping you with removal of the blocks, even as we read this lecture. So as I said at the beginning of this lecture, perfection is limitless and eternal, not only in the sense of time, but also in the sense of scope. You can sense and experience an infinitesimal part of all of this even while on earth. Whoever approaches the stony and steep road of self-finding will experience gradually, little by little, changes that are unbelievable. And again, he doesn't say, you will change yourself, right? Or you will make yourself change. He says, you're going to gradually, as you discover and see and understand more, gradually, little by little, you will have changes that are unbelievable or would be unbelievable for anyone who does not invest in this. I do not promise miracles, my friends. Miracles in that sense do not exist. Whoever wants to believe in that kind of salvation does so because it does not entail personal effort. Wouldn't that be easy? So, here he's saying, you're not really doing anything, but you can't also not put in some personal, work here. And I think that the effort, the work, is the willingness to face and see and recognize these deeper truths and feel what we're feeling. So, no salvation exists without personal effort. This path is one of utter reality. There are no fairy tales. The reality I show you can be experienced by everyone, provided that he or she does not shy away from the labor and is willing to pay the price. Yes, miracles do happen on this path, but only if earned the hard way. That is the way it should be. The way you can safely believe in because it makes sense. And do not forget another thing, that the subtle changes in the personality manifest first inside, so that they are not noticeable by others or manifest in changed circumstances. The first manifestation must always be that you feel and react differently inwardly. The rest follows later. So, my dear friends, let the life force into your soul. You cannot do so by simply willing it, by trying to get into a holy mood, though this may help a little. A prayer will give you the necessary strength to do your part, but the work has to be done. That of the living flow, which you at one time or another have destroyed, has to be regenerated by your own efforts in facing yourself, in overcoming your resistance and sluggishness and self-pity. You should never believe, even for an instant, that what you experience is unjust and unfair. No matter how much it may appear that way, in the last analysis, in absolute truth and reality, you have caused it. You have to find the cause and find a different way to come out of it than the direction you have taken so far, the state you have remained in too long. Think about this, my dear friends. And now a little more advice for your work on image finding. What I have said in the lecture on this subject has surely shown you that various overall general subjects and concepts play a role in the human psyche. Therefore, general attitudes need to be investigated. So I'm not sure where he goes with this, but I'm gonna just kind of give a quick teaching about images here. I mean, I think we can most easily recognize, these generalizations kind of when you think of certain aspects of life, that we might have feelings about, like all work is, or money is, or, and I feel, money is a pain in the butt, so, or money is beneath me, or, like work is always too hard, or or work is my challenge. But and maybe it can even be a positive thing, but the guide says that's usually not an image. It doesn't function like an image. It's like when it's a negative situation that we have encountered, and then we're trying to avoid by like checking for it in the future or in a new situation, and we're kind of like our radar is out for it, like, oh, there that is, and that I know what that is, that's what I believe is going to happen from this situation. And so we're already projecting this whole story on a situation. Sometimes it's very subtle and unconscious, sometimes it's really out there. But wherever we're overgeneralizing from the past onto the present, it's like, and it may even feel like, and it may even be the same person, our parents, for instance, like how we were, they gave us a lot of the images, right? And so when we go back with them, they trigger them again. And yet, we can really kind of separate them from that in a way that can be helpful. And so wherever we are experiencing a negative story about a situation, about a person, about, a pattern in us. So we have a self-image, right? And that's what we were talking about. We have this idealized self-image, which is like how we think we should be, that we're always falling short of. And then we're always judging that and punishing that, or trying to improve ourselves by beating on ourselves, and that doesn't ever get us there. And we just keep recreating, because we basically believe, like maybe we say, oh, I'm a certain way, right? Whatever that is. And we secretly deep down inside, it's an I am statement. That's who I am. That's, and so even though we think I shouldn't be that way, we also have an I am that way. And then those two things, go to war with each other at a certain level that compromises our life force and twists and distorts it. So I don't know if that was very clear or not, but Frank, you want to add anything? You've done a big study of images.
Yeah. Yeah. I would only say that the more I study images, I think the most universal image that almost everyone has is victimhood. It's very easy for someone to get sucked into victimhood. It's also very easy for someone to suck you in with, their victimhood. I mean, and that just cancels out the whole self-responsibility thing, It's like, okay, now I'm a victim. I don't need to be responsible anymore. I can just identify with my victimhood and commiserate with the rest of the millions of people who are attached to victimhood.
Right.
I mean, this is.
And some of that, like, I think can be broken. Like, for instance, maybe you become a victim because you have another image that says, I never get it right, or I can't do this thing, right?
Yeah.
And so the helplessness that maybe as a child, you tried and tried, and your parents always criticized you. And so you never got it right, and you internalized that, right, deeply inside. Yeah. And then you kind of go through life sort of challenging that, but this unconscious level of it still exists. So you keep trying to get it right. But then, like some part of you, still lives in this place where it doesn't trust, it doesn't believe, it doesn't really think that, or even the whole right wrong thing is a little bit suspect, right? But, to feel like you are capable in some way and accomplished, right?
Yeah.
So if you feel,
if we were to take the fall of the angels in a literal sense, it was Lucifer who told the angels that they were victims of God's laws, that God's laws were unjust and they were being victimized by God's laws. So, whether you take it as allegory or fundamentally, you know,
Archetypal. Mhm.
archetypal, right? It doesn't matter. It's still playing out today.
Yes,
Take
absolutely.
somebody like Donald Trump, who goes around preaching victimhood to his followers. You are victims of the immigrants. You are victims of these people trying to take away your opportunities. You are victims of these people who are getting all of your tax dollars for without, you know, who don't deserve to get your these subsidies. They're actually getting your tax dollars. You know,
Right, right.
he's just spewing victimhood to his followers. It works. It'll continue to work. It worked in the spirit world. It's working in this world too. You know.
Yes, and like that is like somehow, the waking up out of that temptation, that the justice of God isn't just, that, like you said, that, somehow something is unfair here.
Right.
And I mean, I know myself, I've been feeling like victimized by computer technology lately, and all of the stuff that drives me crazy about that, right? And I get a lot of pleasure out of yelling at the machine things that want me to give them an answer to something I have no idea what they want.
And negative pleasure is undermining your life force.
Exactly. And I feel it afterwards,
Yeah.
And then if I judge myself for doing that, I feel it even more afterwards. So like most of the time what I do is laugh at myself.
It's a vicious cycle. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. But okay, so you might say to yourself, I don't have opportunities. That's my lot in life. That's my image. Okay, let's just say that was your image. I don't have enough opportunities. Well, then someone comes along and tells you the reason you don't have all these opportunities is because so and 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 so are taking them all away from you. Then you're like, oh, I'm a victim. And you've transferred your image onto a universal image,
Yeah, and I mean I think in some way these people, like and it's on all sides of things. I mean, it's like this is, also, in the ghettos, it's also in all levels of kind of different, populations and stuff like that. So I don't know, certainly Trump is a good antichrist, and he's like representing a lot of this, but I think he's there illuminating it, bringing it out of people, what's already there, and giving them a rallying point or a place where, because otherwise it's been suppressed. They've been feeling that and sitting on it, and unless it gets activated and expressed and worked with emotionally and out into the light, I don't think it's like that was the other lecture I was going to do, is on the, on the individual and humanity. And the guide is talking in that one how, the evolution of the individual and the evolution of humanity are kind of interconnected, and there's follow the same kind of inner processes. And so, the parts of humanity that are less evolved, right, are have to come into the light. They can't remain in the unconscious in order to transform or to change. And so, and for the rest of the world to see, right, so and maybe, like when I say, oh, look, he's making everybody victims, the most important thing is, but I'm not going to be one, like it's not about me taking his inventory. It's about me making sure that I don't feel victimized by him because that happens too, right? We see him. I'm the same, I just pray, like it goes away at some point and this whole thing goes away. I don't know where it's going, and it's very insidious. And it's, I think, what created a lot of, real evil on the planet from before. And
Hitler used
populism
it
is
too.
very dangerous, and the earth is getting very small. And, we can have a billion civil wars going on everywhere if we follow this whole thing to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, Hitler used it too. But the thing that is troubling to me is that no one's actually stepping up in the public political world and saying, can you not see that he's trying to make you a victim, that you are falling subject to your identity with.
They wouldn't listen to that because they are not in that level of consciousness, and from their experience, right, they are losing the old order that they were the king of the hill in, or whatever. They thought they were duped into believing they were. They probably weren't really, but that's a part of the myth, and that myth is dying. And so then they're reacting from their own, and their own feelings of loss of what they really truly value, which to me is, again, like very unconscious and not very evolved yet. Like what they say is this kind of consciousness is like a kind of tribal or nationalistic or religious sort of group think, right? And it's kind of like my way is the right way. And so you have the old school Christians that are predominantly supporting a lot of this, right? Because not because they love Trump necessarily, but they do feel like society's going in the wrong way and they're being victimized by lots of things. So they're fighting back, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I think it has to come out like this. And so I'm just I think all we can do, so we don't waste our life force worrying or struggling with it, and I'm talking to myself too because I do that, is to try to have faith in this life force that's flowing through everything. And in another lecture, the guide is saying, the time has come. The earth is undergoing this transformation. The earth is undergoing this transformation. Everybody on the earth is going to undergo it. And depending on your level of consciousness, what that's going to look like and how that's going to be experienced. So, I think.
But it almost sounds like, I mean, I don't want to get into a big argument here, but it almost sounds like to me, you would like to detach yourself from the whole political scene and just say, I'm just going to deal with how I deal with my own particular victimhood and not worry about all the people who are being swayed by this demonic person.
Well, I do worry, I'm not detached, but I don't know what good it's going to be for me to fret about it. Is there some particular action that you're taking, like that you think is effective, right? Like if I were younger, I might be marching in the streets. I don't know. But from where I'm sitting these days, right, like I can write letters. I have my radio blog, it's like we talk about some of these subjects. I don't get outright overtly political. I do on my Facebook page. Some people like it, some people don't, but on my Facebook posts, I have a lot of, even I'm more probably pro-Biden than a lot of my liberal friends are. I think he's doing a great job, and I think the other guy is a total mistake, and I will definitely be voting, and I have a lot of political juice around, the whole Supreme Court situation. I think that's where we really are in trouble, is with that. So, I'm definitely engaged, but I don't really, I try to keep, if I get so agitated in myself that I'm just not gnashing my own teeth and I'm, driving my life force, and then, next thing I'm yelling at somebody because I'm pissed off in general, that's not helping anything.
No, I know, but don't you just wish that somebody like Marianne Williamson, who's supposed to be really woke more than any of the other people in the political arena, would just step up and say, can you not see that Donald Trump is leading you down a road of victimhood?
I think she has said it. I think she could say it, but one, they're not going to listen. They don't even, she's not even on their radar. They're in a echo chamber. They never get posts from her or any, they would never see her on any news station unless she was on Fox.
She was interviewed on Fox. Didn't you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, that's the one time that they've been aware of her. And even if she would have said that, it would have just, they would have just tuned her out. Right. It's like, I mean, people should still say it, because I believe we should speak the truth, whether people listen or not. But, I don't know that it sounds like you feel like that would make some kind of difference, and I
I
don't guess
think
I'm.
it would make a difference if someone would step up and say, do you not see how you are being psychologically manipulated?
That they don't they don't even believe in psychological
Well, you keep
concepts.
saying they don't believe this, they don't believe that, they don't believe that, as if they cannot see that. If somebody didn't point that out to them, they would not be able to see it. I think actually if somebody pointed it out to them, it would start like a little seed growing, a little mushroom cloud of like, yeah, you know what? We are being psychologically manipulated. We are addicted to victimhood. We are so identified with
And I think some of them
that we've lost
making that
track of our brotherhood.
And I think this process, as it plays out, some of them are doing that, right? But the ones I'm talking about, like this is literally a stage of consciousness. And it's like saying, if you told a 2-year-old calculus enough times, the 2-year-old would be able to teach you, or learn. It's not like that. A 2-year-old's mind cannot comprehend and grasp what a 12-year-old's mind can. And so, we're talking about like an evolutionary development of consciousness, and these souls have not developed to that level. So probably the oldest they are in human age, is around 8, 9, 10. It's like even before 12, they're not quite at the age. Some of them have more of the age of reason, but they're really prior to reason. They're in mythic consciousness. And what matters to them is the tribe, the belief, the, kind of my way is the right way, and everybody else is less than me. And so this kind of psyche, it doesn't even comprehend kind of these deeper psychological understandings.
But they're on the same planet with us. They are human beings. They're on the evolutionary path. Otherwise, they would not be here.
Right.
So
and the guy says
isn't
it
it
takes
up to us
lifetimes.
to raise them up?
A guide says it takes lifetimes, and some of them are being. I see it every day. Those that are ready are being awakened. But I would not ever imagine that it's going to, like all of these people are going to be awakened.
Just to the point where somebody like Donald Trump cannot have a foot in the political arena.
Well, I would, yeah,
way past that as a human species.
He ain't though. And that's what we're being shown, like that we, as a species, we still are very young. And what Bill Plotkin says, and I love him, I think he's great, is this Animas Valley Institute, wilderness guide quest person, and he talks about the fact that we are in a pathological state of adolescence, the whole culture to some degree, right? Because, and then, unless in his system, you go through, an initiation and, go through a deep process, you're going to stay in adolescence. And we have a certain desire to stay in adolescence. So, again, we're avoiding sort of this descent that the guide is talking about here to face and touch ourselves, right, and see what's true. And people, are both avoiding that. Some are ready and are doing that, and some are probably just not capable of it at this point. But yeah, I agree. It's like I wish something could happen, and maybe it will. Like we'll open to the possibility, right, that by speaking it, somehow everybody, or most of them will change or get it or begin to have that crack in the cosmic egg.
But sometimes I feel a victim of the ignorance in this world.
Well, and that's a good thing. And so I would look at that almost, again, how much of what we're experiencing is our own self-creation. So you have, we don't really know what the universe is up to in all of this ultimately. And of course, my mind goes back to history, and I think, oh my God, in Nazi Germany, we're going to, another Holocaust. It's like, we're going to be in. So I go to all of these terrifying things, but at some level, I've also seen in my lifetime so many times when I've gone there. And in fact, the universe does something totally unexpected and totally different. And, so I'm trying, and I think, even with Seven Oaks and the sale, it's like that, what I keep hearing the universe reflecting back to all of us is, and it's kind of what the guide is saying too, in this whole new age thing, we're going places we've never been before. And so our minds can't guide us. The history can't guide us. We have to let go of what we think we know and trust something bigger and have faith and, do our work, because to the degree that we are being a victim of or feeling victimized by their victimization, right? It's creating a problem in us for our life force. And we are now responsible for clearing that out so that we can have a flowing free life force.
Hard to do.
Yeah. And we get hooked, it hooks us in. So to me, it's a lot about, and again, I agree with you, hard to do. I'm terrible at it. I'm hooked all the time, but I do know what the guide is saying and what the way out is. And then I also know that, yeah, we can't control it. We just have to recognize it. We get hooked and we realize it again, and we step back, or we hold it in a different way, or we, um, see what spirit wants from us in the situation instead of our usual reaction, right? Because if it's coming to us, it's an opportunity that spirit's giving us to meet it at a certain level. And if we meet it in that way, it won't be totally perfect necessarily, or exactly how we want it or anything like that, but it will be the way that everything can move forward, and heal, or be, in a better direction, that we can flow, in the guide says where we're undergoing, transformation at these mass scales, right? He says how the individual is configured is going to matter. And that doesn't mean, for instance, that, like if some major shaking happened, that it wouldn't affect me from a physical standpoint, maybe, let's say the bank system collapsed or something, or the whole culture, so it's going to affect me, but how I respond to that, and what resilience, what inner strength, what, ability to, care for others instead of just, tightening up and contracting and running away, or losing my mind out of my grief and my despair of it, or something like that. Like we have these choices. And so, like, everything that life brings, the life force brings, is something that we're being asked to meet. And if we meet it and it's difficult to meet, we notice we really react and we have all kinds of difficulties. That's just saying, okay, so this is where the work is, right? This has to clear. And so whatever we're reacting to, it's our responsibility to calm those waters, get out of the defense, connect with higher self, and follow that. And it's, I misstep every day. So let's see. We were doing a little more work on image finding. So, and I was talking about images, and so he's saying, the method I have presented so far covers, briefly speaking, the various lists, which I do not need to again enumerate, the life story of the individual, the practice of the daily review. With this material at hand, this is how he's saying that we can discover our images. You can be successful in finding your images. Now I would like to give you an additional item to add to the method. Some of you have used it anyway without quite realizing it, but now this should be incorporated as an integral part of the work. It is this: take all general ideas, concepts, and principles. Make a list of all those that are important in a person's life. Some I've discussed already, such as love, eros, sex, authority. Others I shall discuss in the future. Think of money, work, various emotions, human relationships, plus a number of other general subjects, which you can examine successively according to what is the person's most pressing problem. Find out what is the attitude of each individual toward that subject. Let people tell you first their general idea, their concept on the subject they apparently have difficulty with, and then begin to question the person about his or her life from that particular point of view, covering childhood, adolescence, young adult life, and so on. So we want to try that. Like, so both of you want to sort of think of which one of those subjects do you struggle with or have issue or some conflict, or, could be love, sex, authority, money, anger, sadness, boyfriends, mates, men, women. So it could be various kinds of human relationships. So everybody got one?
You want to take a stab at that, Trini?
Sure. So just an idea that I have about one of those topics or
Like he's saying that we have images about all of these topics. We have conclusions that, then create how we experience them. So for instance, for me, like a part of me would like to have more money in life, but another part of me, basically thinks money is dirty, or money is, greedy, or money is, so I have judgments about money, and so then that blocks me from, like receiving maybe a fuller amount of appreciation in the form of money or whatever. I don't know, so something like that. So like where you have difficulty, like, are you good with money? Are you good in work? Do you have trouble with certain relationships? So where is the difficulty in your life?
I would say relationships.
So is it so like a relationship, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, or is that kind of, or a husband, or
Yeah, marriage.
Relationship.
Marriage.
So
Yeah.
just notice before you go to your particular marriage, just think, like, do you have some general felt belief sense, all marriage, most marriages are fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Based on what I've experienced in life, unsuccessful.
Uh-huh.
That's what I have
Right.
witnessed.
Good. And so if most marriages are unsuccessful, what do you have to do to, kind of control that, or make sure that that doesn't happen to you, or, like that? Because wherever we have an image, the guide says we create a defense, right? And then he says that the defense actually causes the image to come true.
Yes. So I have always sort of drawn a correlation between marriage and failure based on what I've felt in life, what I've witnessed in life. And so that's just sort of my overall pessimism that I attach to marriage in general.
And so is there anything that you do to try to avoid that pessimistic result inside of you or in your relationship?
Yes. I try to learn, and that's why I'm doing this sort of work. I try to understand myself so that I can sort of dissect things
Right.
and come to an understanding instead of just labeling
Right.
it as something that's not going to work.
So that's
I'm
good.
always-
That's not a defense. That's actually, doing something besides the defense. But if you think before, maybe now that that you're doing this work, I mean, have you ever tried to, deal with this fear and this, kind of belief sort of more in a different way, like
Yes.
by controlling who they see or something, or whatever the problem was, like, yeah.
Right. There's also been sort of a knee-jerk reaction to assume the worst in a situation. So I think there's sort of this negativity that I have
Yeah,
because I automatically think it's not supposed to work.
right.
So I
Excellent.
go to a very negative place in my mind of,
And that negative place is there kind of to protect you from being a fool or believing in a relationship that's not, so it's kind of like, it's again, to be negative is to try to protect you from a disappointment of some kind, because you basically believe that's what's going to happen. But then in that negativity, you actually, will manifest people, the failure of the relationship, because people have trouble, connecting with you in your suspicion and negativity, or, your general overall reaction of, not trusting them. Right. And without the
right,
trust. Yeah.
right, yeah,
A good example. So that's kind of a part of what he's talking about, is we can get to these images personally if we use these general topics and theory, and kind of look at what we believe about the general topic, and that can kind of take us into the very personal way that it works in our life. So, do you want to give it a shot, Frank? Or
I'm thinking about love,
okay,
self-love. I struggle with that, and brotherly love. Like I'm supposed to love all those ignorant people who are voting Donald Trump. You know, I don't know how to do that. I also have a hard time loving myself.
So, what is there like a generalized belief you have about love?
Possibly that it's something you get as a reward for good behavior.
Okay. So, and so, if you're not loving these other people, you're not being good, and so you should
I don't deserve to be loved by anyone
deserve to be
else.
loved, right? And then with self-love, that means you can only get self-love if if you manifest your idealized perfectionism, right? Like if you're
Yes, that's me not living up to my how should I put it, my soul's mission. It's like, okay, I understand that there are certain behaviors that I should change, that I do, but they're almost like, in a way, addictions, and it's very difficult to change these behavioral patterns. And if I can't change these behavioral patterns, well, then, I'm letting myself down, I'm letting God down. I'm letting the universe down. I'm letting all my fellow angels and human beings down, because I just can't change a few distorted behavioral patterns that I have. I mean, why should it be so difficult?
I'll tell you. And you're going to be, like this is the key, and it's very tricky in a way, and especially with that ISI, because basically the reason why habits and addictions can't change is because they're unforgiven.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
And like we get in this, battle within the part, you have to do it, like I can't do it, like the authority tries to make, and the other part rebels, or, wants it, what it want, so it is, like we have to approach it from a very different way to actually make the transformation. And we also have to recognize, like, we're moving to become Christ, to become God, but that's a pretty high bar, right? And so the fact that you can't, I mean, it's less, I think, significant that you can't feel loving for these people that are followers of, Trump and his distortions, that you can you love your closest neighbors, or your family, or your buds, or your friends, or,
I can love my close friends, and I can love my girlfriend. more than I can love myself.
Uh-huh. And I think that's another key, because it's like the more that we do end up, okay, to acknowledge that you do love them can maybe let yourself off your back a little bit around, loving yourself. And the truth is it's like, until we really have this kind of Christ level of self-love for ourselves, we can't have it for anybody else.
I understand, but I mean, I hear that, but I don't completely understand it.
It's the part of the work that we can't make happen ourselves. We have to prepare the space for it. It's like, I don't know if I can remember, I think Pam was sending something, I don't know, something that Donovan said recently is coming to me. That it's like, I lost it. What was it? Well, it's gone. So, that there's just this way that when we are in this place of forgiveness and self, like knowing that God knows us as we are, knows our limitations, knows that, yes, we, are, and our prayer is, okay, God, do, like, I'm willing to be taken as far as you can, as you can. And then also he's respecting our place where we're saying, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. We have free will. God respects our free will. So we have to say, I remember my point now. I want, this healing, and I'm willing to do the, reparative pain. And also, I know that, like, all that's going to do is clear the debris from me, right? And that it's with that your love will flow through me. It's not my personal love that I have to have. It's something that once we've, received and done that, then we feel the love and we pass it on. And it is God's love flowing through us for other people. And Donovan also, was saying that, I can remember at some point, like that this way that we think that we should be loving everybody, it's kind of personalized thing. And it really is not that when we are fully in that form of consciousness, that is that loving. But when we are there, we are also that loving with our own self, that compassionate, that understanding, because we see ourselves and each other as, from that perspective, we're all the same in that way.
Yeah,
So,
I think it must be tied to forgiveness too, because it's so much easier for me to forgive people who, and my friends who may make minuscule, what I call minuscule trespasses against me. I forgive them easily. And I don't forgive my own trespasses against my soul so easily,
right. And being a hard ass with yourself like that, right, is a twisting of your
Blocking the
life.
Blocking the life force.
Yes. Yeah. So it's kind of like, just exploring, like, okay, I was the biggest hard ass of anybody with myself for the longest
You
time,
must have
right?
been something when you first started.
I was a mess.
I wish I had known you back then.
And, but it is like this. Yeah. And it took me a long, long time to get to that place of forgiveness, right? And acceptance of self, as I am in my imperfection. And there's a kind of pride in the other place where this is a kind of humility. It's an acceptance of my divinity and my, potential and the love that I want to bring to this earth. And it's an acceptance of my humanness, my fallibility, my reactivity, my defensiveness, all of that, and I can be both, right? And God can still love me. And from that place, I want God with all my heart to help me heal and repair the stuff and to bring that love to and through me for all my brothers and sisters. And not, generally, but here now in this moment, who's here? Who am I who can I love? Where is my charity wanting to flow? And how can I give? Because he says, that giving and receiving then become that one energy current, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, beautiful and very, very deep and real. And we just have to keep, like penetrating the veil and seeing the pieces and making the prayer, making the intention in our heart of what we want, because we have to ask our guides for help with this stuff, right? We can't do it alone. And that's the other problem is that the ego thinks that it's supposed to do it alone or on its own, and it's bad if it doesn't do it, so it's kind of like, again, more of that pride, more of that isolation and self-centeredness that comes out in this kind of independence and in this trying to whip oneself into being, who God would love. So it's part of that distortion of the life force for sure. So, and then again, he's saying when we go into those, we can look at the childhood stuff. So, for you as well, training item, we didn't kind of cover that piece, but where you were exploring your image, right? Then you can examine it from how it was in your life through your life, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So let that person tell you what his parents' attitude or parent attitude was on the subject. So again, this often goes back to our clan patterns and what our parents taught us, right? You may then find out that in 9 of 10 cases, the intellectual concept is completely different from the emotional behavior or attitude. So we also think and feel totally different. This should furnish an important clue for the images and wrong conclusions. Incorporate this approach into the overall method and use it whenever the time seems right. Make it into a definite program. Yet there should be no rigid system. You have to work with your intuition and according to the personality. In one case, one subject should be taken first, and another, a different one might be appropriate. And yet another case, it may be better to wait with this type of investigation altogether. In due course, we will discuss many general subjects of this sort from the viewpoint of the wrong interpretation in the unconscious and what the right reaction would and should be. And now, my dear friends, before we turn to your questions, I would like to make a proposition which should prove exceedingly interesting to you all. There is so much friction among you, and this is unavoidable in any human group. And you are also all full of goodwill and do not want any friction. The question always is how to eliminate it. There are various ways. Some you have tried, some not, or have forgotten. Let me make a new suggestion which should work out well if you use it. You all know that lawyers can defend a case from 2 entirely different sides. They can first represent the case from one viewpoint and be utterly convincing, and then they can take the opposite side and be equally convincing. Any lawyer will confirm this to you. Many practice it as part of their training. If there is friction between you and one of your brothers or sisters, my advice is that you become an advocate in his or her defense. Take the case and try to see how the other one sees it and present the case first to yourself. That will be the easiest. Then go to an objective third person detached from the conflict, perhaps the person you work with, and repeat this process in their presence. This would be the second step. And if you really want to reach the highest step in this particular regard, go to the person with whom you have the conflict and be the advocate in his or her defense. Perhaps he or she will do the same. It takes courage and humility, the 2 attributes so inevitable to reach any success on this path. But if you cannot bring yourself to the third and highest step, try the first and perhaps then the second. Take up this task in seriousness. Do not make a half-hearted attempt. Try to forget yourself. Try to act on your adversary's behalf as though you actually were a lawyer and your reputation were at stake. By defending badly because in a corner of your being you still want to prove how right you are, you have not fulfilled your job at all. Play a game. Imagine your life depends on presenting a convincing case for the other person. The better you represent him, the better it is for you. and not as you may continue to believe. The better you defend him, the worse you come out. After the other has heard you first as your client, he will give you additional material so that you can succeed better. Listen to it so as to extend and strengthen the case for your client. Do you know what this will do for you, my friend, my dear ones? It will open new vistas of understanding. You are so used to representing only your own case. There you are perfect. There you do not need further improvement and practice. Learn now to see the other side. Be the lawyer for the other one instead of for yourself. This is my advice. It will be a very good exercise, the surest and fastest way to eliminate friction or to reduce it to a minimum, provided you follow it through. It may also be a good idea for group work. First, state briefly your own case and then become the lawyer for the other. Let the others judge whether you are a better lawyer in your own behalf than on behalf of the other person. So it's 9. We can continue. I haven't, sometimes these questions are, on target with some of the material, and sometimes they're often different, things. So feel okay to keep going with some Q&A here? We can close now if people would like, or we can go for about another half hour if people want.
I'm open. It doesn't matter. I have the time.
Okay with that. Frank, you good for another half hour?
Yeah, I can hang. Yes.
So science says that life is light and consciousness. Does that correspond to what you said tonight? Intelligence and light. Of course, only it is much more than that. Intelligence and light are only 2 details. The life force is everything that exists, everything good, and everything negative or detrimental is simply petrified life force, divine truth or divine law that has not been adhered to. What are the main qualifications and prerequisites for team workers? After how long a training in self-purification, generally speaking, should they start working as team helpers? I guess he's instituted some kind of team helper thing. This is, of course, quite difficult to answer in general terms, but I will try. One of the general qualifications is a certain psychological trait that goes without saying. Who has this talent and who does not will show rather quickly. In most cases, even the person himself will be aware of whether or not she has this talent. This is certainly nothing to be ashamed of if one does not have it. Not everyone has the same talents. Everyone who is halfway honest with himself will know whether he or she has a number of qualifications that put together are the talents required for this particular work. For instance, insight, intuition, power of deduction, observation, a very warm interest in other people, positive feelings, also a certain basic detachment. The time element is impossible to fix. It varies. Some people may be capable of doing this work sooner than others. It depends on them. It is not a prerequisite that all images be found and dissolved before one can work with others. That is not necessary. Although some discoveries need to have been made, some results of the search for images should have been achieved. But one absolute prerequisite is to have done some successful work on one's path, felt the relief of the recognitions, and experienced interchanges. Before this experience and sense of relief, one person would not be able to help another. You must have had that feeling to know what it is like. Only then can you do your helping with conviction. As long as a certain relief and victory have not taken place, you would be so much in darkness, so ensnarled in your own difficulties that you could never have open eyes for another. The necessary detachment and intuition would be missing. So that is the criteria by which you can proceed and judge. Each one of you must know best whether you are ready or not. When you ask yourself, did I have that experience? Am I completely convinced? Did I overcome certain basic problems in myself? Do I understand truly what in me is causing my main problems? I repeat, the images do not have to be dissolved, but the relief that is the inevitable result of the understanding certain causes and effects in one's life must have been experienced. Question. On rereading the last lecture on the wall, it seems to me that when we are supposed to find the wall, we are also supposed to realize that this wall is almost physically present. Is that correct? Answer: I do not know what you mean by physically. I meant that you should visualize it. You should feel it as a concrete something in your soul. After a while, you will get to this point, but you cannot see it physically. It is just that you feel a hardness in you, something that prevents you from being completely empty and flowing. So those are the blocks that we learn to feel, right? I think that occasionally it can be seen in reverie and before waking. Answer: that is possible. It can also be seen in a dream. Question: is it only after the wall has disappeared that one's spiritual rebirth can occur? Does this disappearance occur when you have become curious of everything that was behind the wall, or only after you have actually purified yourself? The spiritual rebirth can occur after you are completely conscious of everything that was behind the wall. Then the regenerative forces of nature can begin to work. But try to realize what it means to be completely conscious. It includes applying the findings at all times to one's reactions, and that is certainly not so easy. Can one be completely conscious of all one's wrong trends? The time must come. I do not say that it has to come in this life for all of you. Perhaps there are very, very few of you for whom this is possible. But eventually it must come for everyone. Until that point is reached, you go on and on incarnating. But you can reach quite a distance in this life, and thus you speed up all succeeding lives because your psyche becomes impregnated with the process of self-search. It becomes second nature and will remain in the soul so that the entity will benefit by this habit in future incarnations. I will retire into my world and leave all of you with divine blessings and strength. May the new friends who have found their way here take the trouble and patience to find out whether they can find the many answers this path has to offer. Let none of you be hasty. Receive at least particles of the life force that is contained in every blessing. How much you can absorb depends entirely on your own state of mind. Bitterness, anger, self-pity, all these block the life force. Remember that. So try to open your doors. Be blessed, my dear ones. Be in peace. Be in the Lord. So, yeah, try to open your doors. You know, like this is one of those very subtle, and like we hear that from the ego mind, and we feel like we have to somehow do something, and he's very allegorical and kind of, so like what does that even mean? And this other person, was talking about the this image of the wall, right? And sort of getting confused again in the fact that it's not in the mind, or it's not in physical, but he's pointing to it's in an experiential place inside of us that we can know and feel. So you can feel the blocks in your being, in different ways. Sometimes you can intuit them from what's going on in your life, but most of the time it's in, feeling the energy moving in your body, noticing the feelings that are coming up or the resistance to the feelings that are there. So just to throw that in on top of these. So
I like the way he says, well, he doesn't exactly say it that way, but he basically saying that the work you do is cumulative.
Amen.
From one lifetime.
Yes.
All the more reason for me to break some of these bad habits I'm wrestling with.
I mean, of course, and yet, the good news is that, like God is not mad at you for only doing how much you've done, right? It's like we do the best we can. Like, I really deeply believe that when we sort of Monday morning quarterback ourselves and think, oh, I could have, should have, would have done better, that's part of the mask and ISI and is not useful. And that if we really go inside and ask ourselves, well, if I didn't, why didn't I? And then we go back into the original situation where we were at the time, and we realize who we were at the time and what we were feeling at the time. And then we know, it was impossible for us to do it differently, right? We did it as best we knew how in the moment, and then we learned from that. And so again, the learning curve is happening, and already that's embedded in our conscious awareness. And so maybe it'll take many more seeds to plant of that same realization before we can internalize it and naturally act on it. But that's all we're doing, is we're continuing to reinforce the truth, remember the truth, recognize the distortion, or and just not judge ourselves for not getting it right, but just imprinting it in this kind of every time it happens, so that we can hopefully hold on to it in an organic and natural way the next time it shows up in our life. And then we kind of are spontaneously, and then we'll look back, like many times the changes that I've gone through, like I don't remember when I changed. I just remember looking back and thinking, that's weird. I'm not doing that anymore. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's more along those kinds of lines, and again, trusting in the process of our own soul, trusting in the process of the divine as the universe is unfolding and challenging and bringing to us the issues that, come up, and that our life is our path, right? And everything that we encounter, we don't have to, we just have to be with it and do our best with it. And, if we fail to do it perfectly, that's fine. We're going to encounter it again, I promise. And you can, if you don't judge, if you don't make yourself bad for it, if you don't, then you will retain and learn and remember. If you forgive yourself, right, for the error, then you can hold on to it. When we criticize, judge, the child just kind of goes into a little hole and curls up and can't learn a thing. So we want to, help the child come, because they've been battered a lot, by the parents in this world, our own included.
Yeah, and our cultural,
exactly. Yeah.
upbringing. I was brought up in the Catholic Church. I mean,
right.
You want to talk about heaping on some guilt.
Right. And then you interject it, and so then you do it to yourself still. Right. And then, maybe it's not your Catholic guilt anymore, but you still have guilt about not, doing enough, some kind of thing. And so, it's kind of like trust, trust that the life force in you will do as much as it possibly can. And if you get off your back, it'll free a lot of it up so you can do more. Okay, so I think that's good for this evening. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Thank you, Darlene.
Good thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna stop this shit.